Ian is showing some signs that it will start to become better organized and intensify starting later on Sunday. This is the 11 o'clock advisory from the Hurricane Center. Winds are 50 miles per hour, gusts to 65. But what they found this morning, not just in satellite data that we're seeing with kind of thunderstorm action on both sides of the storm, but also the hurricane hunters are finding is that the low-level center and the mid-level kind of center of circulation of Ian, they're starting to better align. And once they better align, that will kind of turn the switch on and allow this thing to really crank up and intensify over the next 48 hours as it moves through the Caribbean. It is moving west-northwest right now at about 14 miles per hour. And new at 11, hurricane warnings now issued for western Cuba, the western tip of Cuba. Also, there are some tropical storm warnings for that kind of second, so to speak, tier on the western side of Cuba. Hurricane warning continues for Grand Cayman as well, where they expect hurricane conditions to arrive Monday, later on Monday. And then for Tuesday, those hurricane conditions will arrive in Cuba. Here's the official cone of uncertainty from the National Hurricane Center, the track, so to speak. Becoming a hurricane by Monday morning, and then you notice by Tuesday morning becoming a major hurricane. So that's moving over warm, not just warm at the surface, but a really good heat content in the warm Caribbean waters, and that will allow this thing to just take off and intensify really quickly. Then it makes it out over to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, you'll notice the cone of uncertainty has landfall anywhere from the western tip of Florida all the way down to still about Fort Myers area. So there's a huge area that is still under that cone of uncertainty, but this storm, as it's nearing landfall, will likely encounter a little bit of wind shear. And that might help to take those max wind speeds down just a bit. However, the storm size will be much larger by the time it's approaching landfall. So this thing will bring significant impacts of storm surge, rain that could cause flooding, and also, of course, the strong winds as Ian is approaching landfall. But where exactly does landfall happen? We really still have this big model spread in the models this morning, and I want to show you the spaghetti models first. We really have two kind of theories within the models, so to speak. We've got the UK Met and the European models, and they are having this thing more influenced by an upper level trough and almost getting steered eastward quicker. That's these pink colors right here, the European. That would mean an earlier landfall, and it would also mean that, Florida Panhandle would not see the type of impacts that could happen with the westernmost track. But a western track, look at this, all these models, the American model, we call it the H-Wharf, it's the hurricane model, they're taking it in towards the Florida Panhandle. Okay, so there's a huge spread for this just being a few days out. I mean, we normally see uncertainties, but there's, I think, a little bit greater than normal uncertainty with where the landfall is going to be. Think about it. You've got the whole western coast of Florida, the Panhandle, and the west coast of Florida, all along the Gulf of Mexico, that has to prepare now for a potential major hurricane to make landfall as early as Wednesday, as late as Friday. So we really don't know exactly where landfall is going to be. Hurricane hunters have several missions scheduled today to fly into Ian to get a better handle on the storm. And also National Weather Service offices, over 50 around the country, are doing extra balloon releases, weather balloon releases. That data, what's happening with the winds and the temperatures and the dew points, that's all being taken into weather model data to help improve the forecasts. You know, they even had some places in Oregon and Washington State that we're doing these extra balloon releases to try to better sample the atmosphere. So there's really a huge effort to hone in on where this thing's going to make landfall. But the governor of Florida now saying that everybody needs to be ready by Tuesday morning for a major hurricane landfall. We just don't know exactly where that landfall will end up going. Look at the spaghetti models beyond landfall. Look how a lot of them bring it up in towards Georgia. We don't know ultimately what our impacts will be here in Georgia, but it does look like we could see some at least tropical moisture moving in and increased rain chances. Here's that model discrepancy put in another light. This is the American and European models from earlier Sunday morning. You notice the European getting tugged to the right already by Wednesday morning, and that path would be a faster path for landfall, but it would also mean more intense for the Tampa area, Orlando. They've already decided to delay Artemis and not launch it, but they're still trying to decide if they're going to actually have to bring the whole spacecraft inside into protection. So that could mean a scenario where they would have to do that probably. But then the American model, as it's not swept up by that trough, kind of loses some of its steering currents and slows down a bit more before landfall. So it ultimately is still battering that west coast of Florida with a lot of surge action and rough waves. And then ultimately it still has the landfall somewhere near Apalachicola or Panama City Beach. I mean, it's really too early to say where the landfall is going to be, but ultimately we know this will be a major hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. There might be some weakening as we head past Tuesday to Wednesday time frame thanks to some wind shear, but significant impacts because of the size of what this storm can grow to are going to be likely. That's the 11 o'clock advisory on Sunday. Meteorologist Nicole Hartford is going to be in later today updating what we've learned today about Tropical Storm Ian and the latest track on where this storm will potentially go, what it could mean for us here in North Georgia.